Most Disney movies are tales of good against evil. Witty, charming heroes and heroines against cruel, vicious villains with overwhelming power. Grand spectacles of art and music, with visuals of sweeping landscapes and soaring mountains. Lady and the Tramp is not one of those movies. It's a much smaller story, about a dog and her everyday life in a quiet neighborhood, gorgeously hand-drawn with pencil tests and stills being used in the title and credit sequences. I know I've said it before, but there truly is nothing like hand-drawn animation. It's just gorgeous, and you can see the passion of the artists in every stroke. We're introduced to our star, Lady, a Cocker Spaniel puppy being given to a woman we know only as Darling by her husband, Jim Deere, for Christmas, in a gorgeous Victorian home, which I am so jealous of. I think it's really cute how we only know them by the loving pet names they call each other by, the names a dog would hear most often, rather than their actual names. Presumably the man's name is Jim or James, but Darling we never hear get called anything else, so it's anyone's guess. A cute detail here is that Lady being given to Darling in a hatbox is something that was pulled from life, as Walt gave his wife Lillian a puppy one year the same way. Lady quickly makes herself right at home, getting the right to sleep in their bed with them even if at first Jim Deere didn't want her to, intending it to only be one night, but, well, as we see later, it's clearly become her permanent spot. She's made herself part of their morning routine, bringing their slippers and going out to fetch the paper for them, even if it gets a little torn up on the way in. They don't seem to mind, even being happy that they don't see the nasty headlines as much. But, just for the record, don't give dogs coffee. It's not good for them. They declare that she's 6 months old now, so they need to get her a license, which they do on a lovely new blue collar. Fun fact, blue used to be considered a girl's color, and red and pink were considered more masculine colors and associated with men. Blue was seen as a soft, gentle color, more suited for girls, while pink, being from red, the color of blood and strength, was used more for boys. This changed during World War II when pink triangles were used to identify gay men, with fashion magazines quickly declaring pink a feminine color and blue a masculine color to avoid parents dressing their boys in pink and being associated with homosexuality. So, if you get someone making a big fuss about a guy wearing pink, ask them why they let Nazis dictate their fashion choices. Lady goes to see her two friends, dogs belonging to the neighbors, a Scottish Terrier named Jacques and a Bloodhound named Trusty, who both compliment her on her collar. They're very friendly and clearly quite protective of her, being the old-fashioned gentlemanly sorts. Their polar opposite comes in the form of a street dog sleeping by the train yard, a mutt of indeterminate breed named Tramp. He seems to be doing all right for himself, knowing where to find friendly people who will give him food, how to avoid the dog catchers who would take him to the pound. He's free as a bird, happily spending his days just roaming around and doing as he pleases. A bit more time passes and Lady's owners start acting a little strange. Getting a room ready, talking about names, and Jim Deere being quite protective of his wife and going out at odd hours to get strange foods his wife asks for. Lady doesn't understand what's going on and goes to ask her friends, who explain to her that her owners are expecting a baby. Lady has never seen one before, and they try to explain to her what a baby is, with Tramp, who was just wandering by, butting into their conversation and telling Lady that humans only have so much love to give, and when the baby comes, her owners will be spending all their love on it and not her. His words frightening Lady and upsetting her friends, Jacques in particular getting angry and telling Tramp to get out despite being much smaller than Tramp. Tramp leaves, but insists on his way out that Lady will see for herself soon enough that he's right, and her humans are going to forget all about her when the baby comes. On a stormy night, the baby does arrive, a little boy. Lady sees some of the new, unusual additions to the house. New furniture, new decorations, strange glassware sitting on a windowsill. Now, despite the odd shapes of these bottles, this is in fact one example of what baby bottles used to look like. People have been using bottles to feed their babies for a very, very long time, the earliest known examples being spouted ceramic vessels from Neolithic Germany dating back over 7,000 years, with traces of animal milk inside, suggesting that people were using cattle, goats, and camels as an additional source of milk for their infants. Bottles were usually earthenware or ceramic up until around the mid-19th century, when they started being made of glass. That didn't make them much safer, though. The nipples were often made of porous materials like leather, sponge, wood, ivory, even pickled cow's teats, and the older style of rubber, which was a perfect growing medium for all kinds of bacteria. And the bottles came in odd shapes that were very difficult to clean. Many people didn't wash them out after each use, or even daily, resulting in milk residue often being left inside. One popular style of bottle, the style they actually show here, with the little tube coming out of it, came to be known as a murder bottle due to the sheer number of infant mortalities that ended up being attributed to it later on, when germ theory and sterilization became better understood. New York State banned the bottles in 1906, with other states quickly following. The bottle shape we're familiar with today didn't really come about until much later, with sterilization also becoming more standard and people learning much more about how to keep their babies safe. Lady at first is intimidated and uncertain, but her owners bring her to meet their little one, with Lady quickly coming to care about the infant as well, and her owners making it clear that she wasn't going to just be pushed aside or forgotten, easing the fears that Tramp had given her. Things continue on for a little while until her owners need to make a trip. A family member of theirs, an older woman called Aunt Sarah, presumably a spinster great-aunt, comes to tend the house and the baby. She brings with her 2 cats who, well, you wouldn't get away with their designs or voices today, I can tell you that. These cats are obviously spoiled and waste no time causing trouble, breaking vases, trying to eat the pet fish, and when they realize there's a baby in the house, they immediately try to head upstairs to steal milk. Lady tries to stop them, the cats destroying more furniture and the noise causing Aunt Sarah to quickly come down, the cats acting like they're hurt, so Lady takes all the blame. This causes Aunt Sarah to take Lady out to get a muzzle put on. The muzzle is fitted on her, but Lady escapes, running into some aggressive dogs who chase her into an alley where she's rescued by Tramp, who takes her to a zoo to get the help of a beaver to get the muzzle off, tricking the beaver by telling him it's a log-pulling device. The beaver seems quite happy at the end of it though, so we can forgive him and Lady for the trick. He walks around town with Lady, showing her the sights and introducing her to the kind restaurant owners he gets food from regularly in the famous Bella Nota scene that has been memed to absolute death and parodied in almost everything that's been made since. They end up spending a night together under the stars, with Lady insisting in the morning that she has to go home, and Tramp arguing that her family clearly doesn't care about her if they let her be muzzled and treated that way, and she should just stay on the streets with him. She says she can't, even if how he describes things sounds wonderful, because she has to help look after the baby. Tramp starts taking her home, but they run into a dog catcher who manages to grab Lady without Tramp noticing and takes her to the pound. While at the pound, she finds out that the other dogs know Tramp. Apparently he goes through girls like tissues, with all of them listing off dogs he's previously been with, and it's not a very short list. They also tell her that her license is her ticket to freedom, and explain to her what happens to dogs who are in the pound for too long, with one dog getting taken to the back, presumably to be euthanized, a practice that was much more common back then before no-kill shelters became a thing, and when the shelters didn't have as much funding, resulting in much higher euthanasia rates than we have today. Aunt Sarah comes to pick Lady up and take her home eventually, tying her up in the backyard. Jacques and Trusty come to see her, talking about matrimony. For most kids now, this would seem out of nowhere and confusing, but those of us who grew up on Regency romances know exactly why they're talking about it. See, back in the day, if a lady of quality, basically anyone from a higher class home, whether noble or not, but especially nobility, went through some kind of experience or trouble that might make people question her, for the lack of a better word, purity, like spending a night somewhere she wasn't supposed to, basically the only way to save face would be for her to very quickly be married off to someone who was considered a man of quality, who could give her a cover story and wrap things up with a neat little bow. Lady tells him that she can't marry either of them, but she appreciates their offer. Tramp comes by and sees her, nearly being run off by Jacques and Trusty, who show clear disgust towards him. But Lady assures them that she can handle the situation herself, so they leave him alone. Tramp tries to play things off as just a misunderstanding, trying to comfort her, but she gets angry and asks him about all the other dogs that she's heard he was with, and telling him to go away, hiding in the doghouse and crying until he walks away. A large, vicious-looking rat that had tried to get into the house a few times before, stopped by Lady, appears. Lady barks at it and tries to get to it, but can't because of the rope tying her up. Tramp hears her barking and comes to see what's wrong, hearing that the rat got into the house and going inside to find it. He finds it in the baby's room, the rat about to leap into the cradle with the sleeping infant. What exactly it was going to do is uncertain, but there's nothing good that could have happened to a baby from any kind of contact with a rat, especially in those days. Tramp attacks the rat, the noise of the attack and furniture being knocked over waking up Aunt Sarah. Lady gets loose from the rope to come in and check the baby. Tramp killing the rat, though he gets hurt himself in the process, and the rat's body is left behind a curtain. Aunt Sarah assumes that Tramp was attacking the baby, chasing him into a closet with a broom and locking Lady in the basement before calling animal control, who picks up Tramp just as Lady's owners are getting home from their trip, the dog catcher telling them that he's just getting a dog that was caught attacking a baby. Jacques and Trusty hear this, shocked that Tramp would ever do something like that, and go up to the house to listen in. When she's let out of the basement, Lady quickly leads everyone up to where the rat's body is, proving that Tramp was innocent and had been protecting the baby, not attacking him. Jacques and Trusty hear this, saying they misjudged him and they have to save him from being destroyed by animal control. They chase down the carriage Tramp is locked in, Trusty proving that he can still track, and they manage to stop it until Jim Deer can get there and explain what happened. It looked like Trusty was killed by the carriage in the process, but we quickly find out that while he was injured, he's okay. We get a time jump to Christmas, with Tramp and Lady having had puppies of their own. 4 of them, 3 that look just like Lady and 1 that looks like Tramp, with Lady's owners adopting Tramp as well. And we get a warm ending that bookends the beginning. Now, the timeline is a little bit fuzzy. Lady is given to Darling as a Christmas gift. Presumably, she's at least 6 to 8 weeks old when this happened, as she'd have to be that old to be weaned. The next for sure time is established when they say that Lady is 6 months old, so if she was a little over a month to 2 months old when they got her, that'd make this about 4 months later, roughly in April. However, there's a later scene when Jim Deere seems to be trying to estimate the due date for their baby, and he circles the month of April, which would imply that Darling got pregnant sometime in July of the previous year. She would have to have been about 5 months along by December when she was given Lady, so they would have already known that they were having a baby before they got a dog. They didn't seem to talk about or know that they were going to have a baby when they got her, and in the shots we see of Darling when Lady describes how Darling swatted her for trying to play with some yarn, she isn't showing at all, which wouldn't be the case unless it was pretty early on. It seems like they skipped a Christmas somewhere in the story, and the ending takes place at least 2 years after they got Lady. Trusty's leg is still in a cast when Christmas comes, so it can't have been that long after the rat incident, but it was long enough for Lady to have puppies who are at least a few weeks old and are walking around. The most likely case is that the writers didn't really think too much about timeline and just wanted to bookend it with Christmas, and there's probably a Christmas that got skipped in between all these events happening. So Lady is probably a little over 2 years old when she has her puppies, and the whole thing with the rat probably happened in late spring or early fall. This movie doesn't have a big villain or any great good against evil conflict. It's just a little slice of life through the eyes of a dog, and it's perfectly enjoyable the way it is for those of us who like smaller stories and can appreciate the art and style that went into it. Not every story needs to be an all-encompassing conflict with explosions and love triangles and the world ending. Sometimes, something small is enough, and it's neat to see everyday life from a different point of view that most people wouldn't even really think about, that of a pet, getting an idea of how they perceive the world with their limited scope. Unfortunately, the sequel didn't take much of the original to heart. During Disney's direct-to-video sequel era, they pushed out a lot of half-baked, often poorly animated and scored movies for the VHS market. Some were okay, some were surprisingly good, and some were just awful. The Lady and the Tramp sequel falls into not good, but not as awful as it could have been. The animation looked nice, even if it was nowhere near the first, and some of the music was catchy and moderately enjoyable. The sequel follows Scamp, the only son of Lady and Tramp who looks identical to his father. It's a pretty basic reversal. Tramp was a street dog who loved the streets and didn't understand the appeal of home life until he fell in love with Lady and learned to live a peaceful life as a pet. Scamp was born into the peaceful life and dreams about running wild on the streets, causing trouble in the household with his constant, overly excited and destructive behavior. Much like how the first movie begins with Christmas, this one begins with everyone preparing for another holiday, the 4th of July. They're just getting ready, though. Unlike the first movie, this one doesn't take place over a long time span, instead only about a week or so. Scamp gets into a lot of trouble, culminating in him being tied up outside at the doghouse as punishment for his actions that day. Tramp goes to try and talk to him and explain that the fantasies he has about running with the junkyard dogs and being in the street are just that, fantasies, and life out there is a lot harder. But Scamp doesn't believe him because he doesn't know that Tramp lived that life before and thinks that he, much like Lady, was always a house pet. They end up arguing, with Tramp telling him to get used to being tied up in the yard every night if he can't learn to behave. Scamp sees the street dogs running around in the alley again. An alley that didn't exist in the first movie, mind you. The neighbors that had Trusty and Jacques were right next door and didn't have alleys between them in the first movie, with Scamp managing to wriggle out of the rope and get free, running off to join the street dogs. The street dogs are made up of mostly forgettable tropes. The big dumb one, the extra ragged old guy, the sleek fallen beauty, the little yappy one, with the only two particularly memorable ones being Buster, the tough Doberman that leads the group, and Angel, a smaller dog that ends up being Scamp's love interest. Now, this is where things get kind of weird. Buster constantly refers to Angel as his girl, implying a relationship, even if Angel denies him and says she belongs to no one. Angel doesn't act like a puppy, and she's not really drawn or voiced like one. Scamp is also voiced by someone who sounds much older than he should be, an adult rather than a kid, though Scamp and his sisters are clearly still puppies. So this could be a case of her being younger than she sounds, but if that's the case, that'd imply that Buster, a clearly adult dog who is about the same age as Tramp, being romantically interested in a puppy, which is... no. Later on, Angel talks about having been through around 5 homes before, and 5 homes. There's no way she's younger than at least 2 or 3 years old to have gone through that many homes, so she is presumably an adult dog, and yet they put her in a romantic relationship with Scamp, who probably isn't older than a few months. That's pretty weird and has some uncomfortable implications, but they are dogs, so we'll let that slide for now. Scamp finds the junkyard dog and makes his introductions and his intentions to join them absolutely clear. None of them think he has what it takes to be a street dog, but he insists that he can totally do it. They agree to give him a shot, and he joins them as they run around causing trouble and looking for food, which mostly consists of trash. He learns from them that Tramp was actually a street dog himself. At first, he thinks it must be another dog they're talking about that just shares his father's name, because in the story that the ratty old dog tells, the legendary Tramp was chased by an entire city's worth of police and dog catchers, and jumped off a waterfall rather than get captured. Buster quickly breaks in and says that isn't what happened, telling the real story, that Tramp met a fancy house dog named Lady and abandoned his life on the streets and everyone he knew, including Buster, to live a pampered house pet life. Buster notices that Scamp has some similarities to Tramp, but Scamp insists that they can't be related to this legendary dog that he was talking about, not wanting to get kicked out of the group. He and Angel spend some time together, recreating a few iconic scenes from the first movie, like the spaghetti scene. Angel talks about how she wanted nothing more than to live a peaceful life as a house pet and the different homes she used to live in, but how something always happened and she'd be abandoned again because someone had a baby or an allergy. This is another indication that she's much older than Scamp, probably at least 3 or 4, closer to his mother's age, which is weird. The 4th of July rolls around. Scamp's family is still sad that they haven't found him yet and that he didn't come home, Tramp blaming himself for his son leaving. Aunt Sarah is trying to cheer everyone up as they have a picnic lunch of what's either a very large chicken or a fairly small turkey in the park. Buster, Angel, and Scamp are hiding in the bushes, with the other junkyard dogs stealing food from basically anybody they can. Buster sees Tramp and his family, and notices the identical way Scamp and Tramp scratch themselves, and with the obvious similarities, Scamp basically being a slightly smaller version of Tramp, he clearly puts 2 and 2 together. To prove his point, he challenges Scamp to steal the turkey from the family. Angel tries to defend Scamp and say that he doesn't have to, as she knows the truth already, but Buster insists. So to prove himself worthy to be a junkyard dog, Scamp rushes in to grab the turkey and run away again. Tramp chases him down, and the whole truth comes out in an alleyway, with Tramp and Buster arguing, Buster accusing Tramp of abandoning them, Tramp arguing that he fell in love and wanted to have a family, and insisting that he's going to take Scamp home whether he likes it or not. Scamp refuses to go with him, choosing Buster and the junkyard dogs over his family. Tramp is obviously hurt by this, but tells him he can come home when he's ready and leaves. Buster tears Scamp's collars off to show that he's a real junkyard dog now, with him and the other dogs using it as a toy. Angel gets angry and yells at Scamp, asking him if trash in the alley is all he wants out of life. Buster starts to get suspicious, with Scamp blabbing that Angel really wants a family, something she's been hiding this whole time. Angel ends up leaving, with Buster acting like he truly considers Scamp part of the junkyard family now. He still wants revenge on Tramp, however, and leads to Scamp getting caught by the dog catcher. Without his collar and license, it's possibly a one-way trip for him, especially since Scamp has been seen causing trouble this whole time. Angel sees him on the truck and rushes to get Tramp, Lady, Trusty, and Jacques when Buster makes it clear that he has no intentions of helping Scamp. Scamp gets put in a cage with a large, clearly violent dog. Tramp shows up and is able to protect him from the other dog and get him free. They return to confront Buster and get his collar back, Buster laughing at him and telling him that a real junkyard dog only looks out for themselves, which startles the other junkyard dogs as they'd always looked out for each other as their own little family. Scamp calls him out for this, with his words convincing the other junkyard dogs that having a home and family would be great. Buster refuses, and ends up getting stuck under a pile of garbage that collapses when he stands on it, left behind the same way he left everyone else behind. Lady and Tramp's owners adopt Angel, which is entirely too many dogs for one household, honestly, and we get to see all the other dogs seem to have been adopted into their own families as the movie ends. It's really not anything particularly great, but it's not terrible either. The age thing is weird, and they should have hired an actual kid or someone who could sound like one to voice Scamp rather than hiring someone who sounds older than Tramp does. But they were working with B-listers whose names were semi-recognizable enough to count as star power on the box. The animation looks fairly nice, even if it's generic and doesn't have that uniquely warm, cozy feeling that the first movie did. It's very much what you'd expect from a knockoff filler kind of movie. Nothing special, but nothing particularly bad either. Something that might keep younger kids entertained for an hour or two so you can catch up on chores. And really, nothing more than that. Most of us would expect a lot more from Disney, but the direct-to-video sequels rarely gave us anything special, with a few exceptions, and compared to what the company is producing now, I'd say they're a cut above. Thank you all for joining me for this one. I've had a really hard time this week. My dog Gigi, the first dog I ever had that was truly mine and that no one could take from me, passed away on Tuesday. She was in her early 20s and already starting to fade, but An attack from another dog pushed things over the edge, and I spent that morning at a vet clinic with her in my arms, wrapped in her favorite blanket as she went to sleep for the last time. I'm trying to keep up with school and other obligations, but it hit me a lot harder than I was expecting it to. I thought I'd be more prepared since I already kind of saw it coming with how old she was and how she was slowing down, but having it happen so suddenly and in a way I would never, ever want it to, it made things so much harder, and I'm still processing that I'm not going to wake up to her grumbling and scratching at my shoulder to get her breakfast or see her gummy smile and wagging tail when I get home. If you have a pet, please give them a hug and some extra treats for me, and make sure you show them how much you love them and how important they are to you. You never know what could happen and how quickly those you love can be taken from you, so make sure that you make every moment with them you can count. Be safe, stay warm, and I'll see you in the next one.